Greetings everyone! My name is Visuasath and I welcome you to my new video in the series Game Analysis. At Sony's latest State of Play stream on the 9th of May 2019, we got a new short and nifty Final Fantasy VII Remake trailer. In this analysis, I will dive into everything related to the battle system and the UI. I already covered the visuals, locations, characters and scenes in general in my previous video. Speaking of, it has already surpassed 2000 views, which is awesome! You guys rock! We also managed to amass almost 100 new souls on this channel since part 1 of this trailer analysis went live, and I'm very grateful for your motivating words and interesting conversations in the comment section. I can't thank you enough for your support. Anyway, to put this analysis into perspective, while I came up with practically all conclusions in this video myself, other analyses did help a lot with refining my own, and I'd like to give credit where credit is due. We have the Night Sky Prince and Soroalarm1 from YouTube, Grimoire88 and their commenters on Reddit, several people from GameFAQs, as well as Shadamp, Lex, Force Stealer, Chip Noir and all the other awesome folks from the Livestream.net community. For those who don't know, the Livestream.net is a fan site dedicated to bringing you Final Fantasy VII news and extensive in-depth information about the game's universe and beyond. You can find their website in the description down below. That being said, even though I'm probably the last one to deliver a battle and UI analysis on this trailer, I believe I'm able to present more details and additional information which have not been covered yet. But enough of this introductory mumbo-jumbo. Let's equip that sense materia and get to work. The first thing I noticed is the huge change from previous versions. Instead of a Kingdom Hearts style menu, we now have two dedicated buttons for normal attack mapped to square and presumably a heavy attack mapped to triangle, which is named differently from each character. Punisher for Cloud and Backblast for Barret. This indicates that each character will have multiple heavy attacks, most likely dictated by the equipped weapon. I say this because if the name and its implied attack never changes, giving the triangle attack a specific and character-dependent name wouldn't make any sense. Just call it heavy attack or something. Both attack buttons appear in the normal menu element design and seem to be active at all times during this trailer. I find it interesting and commendable that they kept the visual feedback when one of the attack buttons is being pressed. During two of Cloud's normal attack combos, we see the player pressing attack several times, and each time the button lights up in blue, gets elevated and a blue flash runs across the bar. On the other hand, we have two scenes with the player controlling Barret, where the Backblast triangle button is constantly shown in blue with the blue flash racing across the bar exactly every 25 frames. This tells me that the player is holding down the triangle button. Remember the effect when a square button is being tapped repeatedly? And how would you visually represent holding down the button with this concept in mind? Correct! Keeping the bar blue and elevated and show the tap effect regularly to visualize a constant press state. That's about it for the attack buttons. Let's move on to the commands menu prompt right underneath. This one is very interesting. Circle calls the commands menu, which I presume will be the Kingdom Hearts-like menu we've seen in the PSX 2015 trailer and the Magic 2017 screenshots. It's unfortunate we don't get to see it in this trailer, but parts of it are still available for analysis. This commands menu seems to be available at all times, even outside of battles during normal field traversal. This indicates we're able to use certain actions directly on the field, like items, healing magic and maybe even elemental magic against obstacles. All this without having to open the main menu, saving time and clicks. On the bottom border, we can make out two blue bars, which resemble the two bars on each character status element. My guess is that all actions taken through this commands menu will cost one or more of those bars. Those bars don't have to be filled up in order to open the commands menu, since it's still available outside of battle where no bars are visible. Additionally, it looks like there's room for 4 more bars ending in 6 bars total, which I predict will be the maximum amount of bars available in the game. And then there's the shortcut menu, which seems to function the same as in the mainline Kingdom Hearts games. You press and hold L1 and the shortcut menu appears, showing actions mapped to each of the 4 face buttons. Here, Braver and Potions are mapped to square and circle respectively. It seems we're able to map whatever command we like to this shortcut menu. While the remaining potion units are shown, there's no limit bar indicator next to Braver, which paints me a little suspicious. Unfortunately, there don't seem to be multiple shortcut pages available like in Kingdom Hearts 3 and we're limited to only 4 commands. On the other hand, this limit forces the player to map only what's currently useful the most. While the L1 indicator only appears when the commands menu is opened, I think this shortcut menu can also be called without entering the commands menu first. It would be too cumbersome and useless otherwise. As mentioned before, we do see parts of the commands menu even though the bulk of it is covered by the shortcut menu. There are the two buttons L2 and R2 for character switching, and those blue bars again which appear underneath the AI characters' names and for the active character just above the menu element area. This further indicates that everything used within this menu will consume one or more of those blue charges. Also, being able to see the blue bars of all the party members directly in the commands menu is a welcome quality of life feature and saves searching for the correct bars in the character status UI. Oh, and there's another positive change. We now see the active character's name instead of the generic command caption on top of the commands menu. It would make a certain amount of sense if the active character's name was placed between those buttons instead of the text command. Now let's talk about character switching for a moment. As I speculated during the analysis of the Magic 2017 screenshots, we can freely switch to any other AI-controlled character and assume control using the L2 and R2 trigger buttons. In this trailer, Barret is controlled on two occasions. Once in the Sector 4 subway tunnels, and the second time when blasting that Grass Strike to smithereens with his big shot limit break. Whether or not the commands menu has to be opened for this character switch to become possible remains to be seen. Though I speculate that character switching is available at all times, just like the shortcut menu. This begs the question if we're also able to switch characters outside of battles as well, to run around with whomever we please. Please Square, let us choose whom we roam the fields and talk to NPCs with. Though I suspect that character switching will be restricted to battles and control returns to Cloud after winning or escaping a battle. However, Nomura-san told us that battles will be seamless, so there's hope. On the other hand, control might change to whichever character was active in the last battle when entering a fight. As we don't see the actual command menu, let's throw around some speculations. When pressing circle, the commands menu seen in previous iterations opens up, containing the additional elements discussed above. It possibly consists of the following elements: magic, summons, limit breaks, items and skills, formerly labeled materia, which contains all yellow materia commands. It's essentially a blend between the Kingdom Hearts menu and the original battle menu. It feels less actiony than Kingdom Hearts, since the commands menu has to be opened manually first, but faster than the original, because the player is able to call the commands menu at will instead of having to wait until the ATB bar fills up. Then, when opened, pressing right on the D-pad opens the respective submenu if available, to select all available abilities inside. The X button is then used to confirm the selected action. But why not enter a submenu with the X button? If the battle continues while the commands menu is up, we should still be able to block incoming attacks with the X button. But why block with the X button? I believe the only other option, the R1 button, is already used for locking onto a target. Notice how the R1 button is missing from the commands menu? While the Magic 2017 screenshots displayed both buttons L1 and R1 within the commands menu, R1 is now gone, presumably because of reassignment to another function not directly tied to the commands menu. Anyway, I was alluding to the battle continuing while inside of the commands menu. While I can see that happening, this could be the perfect opportunity to introduce a wait mode, similar to the original. Here, wait mode would pause the battle when entering the commands menu to give the player time to navigate the commands menu and select the appropriate action, as well as switch to any other character. Active mode would then just keep the battle going, like in Kingdom Hearts. One indication for a possible wait mode is that the commands menu must be opened first. In Kingdom Hearts, the commands menu is always visible and active. If the battle would always continue regardless of the player's settings, having to open the commands menu first every single time would be one unnecessary step too much. Oh, and while in the commands menu, circle will close it again. This concept makes a lot of sense because you can spam or accidentally hit circle twice and nothing happens besides the commands menu opening and closing again. Having X calling the commands menu on the other hand would be rather bad. Let's move on to the character status area. Like in all previous iterations, the active character status element appears bigger and elevated. While the PSX 2015 trailer and this one displays the active character on the bottom, the second Magic 2017 screenshot does the exact opposite. That's one of the changes they reverted to the original vision. The main design looks very similar to the Magic 2017 version, though the content has been rearranged and the cut-off corner at the bottom left has been restored, turning the status UI into a perfect rectangle, which is a complete departure from the first trailer where it was presented in a much more complex form. Personally, I prefer the current version's simplicity. At least a slightly angled and foreshortened presentation of the UI has been retained through all three variations. Same with the brightness border on the outside, both on the menu and the status elements. HP and MP were moved onto the same row as the character's name, while ATB gauge and limit bar now share the same row underneath the rest. The special attack command unlocked by filling ATB charges is missing, however, another element that has been reverted to the PSX 2015 trailer variation. On the other hand, the general design and the multi-charge ATB gauge have been retained from the Magic 2017 screenshots. Speaking of ATB, while I tried not naming that gauge earlier in this analysis, I think it's easier to just keep calling it ATB for the rest of this analysis, even if it is likely to bear a different name in the final product. Anyway, said ATB gauge now appears segmented instead of having separate charge indicators above. We now seem to start off with only 2 charges max instead of 3, though I suspect that number can grow either by leveling up or equipping better gear. Additionally, the ATB system seems now to function very differently, which is why the button prompt for the special attack is missing. Unlike turning from white to red as seen in the PSX 2015 trailer, full ATB charges are now slowly pulsating instead. The same is true for a full limit bar, which glows and pulsates in yellow. The limit bar also has been reduced to only 1 segment again, the 3rd feature rollback so far. Either they scrapped the multi-segment system they were previously pursuing completely, or will gain more limit bar segments as we unlock higher limit break tiers. Though I somewhat doubt that, as there's no limit cost visible on the Braver command. Maybe that will be added once the limit bar receives the 2nd segment. Lastly, there's unused space at the bottom. The Magic 2017 screenshot contained such free space to the right of the character's name instead. Could this be where the active status effects are displayed? If so, they will only be visible on the active character, as the status elements of the other party members appear smaller and thus provide less space. Another difference between the active character and the AI-controlled ones are the missing gauge captions. Yes, captions. They seem to have been censored in this trailer and replaced by those weird waveform symbols. It's evident that those should represent HP, MP, ATB and limit, as seen in previous iterations of this UI, but for some reason they wanted to hide them this time around. Probably to hide the new name of the ATB gauge. It would look strange to have only 1 gauge caption censored, so they covered all of them. If you look closely, the one underneath the limit bar appears a little longer. This coincides with the word limit being longer than the other abbreviations. Also, this censorship looks like it has been done in the game itself, since it doesn't look like an overlay added in the video editor and the UI element's translucency is perfectly retained. Could this be some waveform font they plan to use on other occasions, such as for visualizing glitches in reality? Another improvement is the addition of the max HP number. Though I wonder why they didn't add the max MP number too. Maybe they'll add it in at a later point in development. Another minor detail they reverted to how it was in the PSX 2015 trailer is the text alignment of the HP and MP numbers, which are aligned to the right again instead to the left as seen in the Magic 2017 screenshots. What's interesting is the visibility of the status UI. It's generally invisible outside of battle as seen in the first escape scene. However, in the 2nd escape scene we see only Cloud's status element pop up and fading away again. Here's my theory. When a character takes environmental damage, the status element pops up to reflect the changes. Not sure if this only happens for the active character or not, however. This just occurred to me now. How the heck is Barret supposed to follow Cloud like this with only 1 arm? This is going to be interesting to see, especially if we are able to switch between characters on the field and perform this part of the traversal with Barret. Since the commands menu can also be called outside of battle, I suppose the full character status UI appears for reference while the menu is opened. This is especially helpful when we plan to heal the party. Maybe you've already noticed it, but the ATB and limit gauges are completely missing while traversing the field. This indicates that neither is relevant outside of battle. I suspect the ATB charges are lost upon exiting a battle, though I sincerely hope that the limit bar does not get reset after battles. To round up the UI analysis, let's address another feature which the Magic 2017 screenshots introduced, only to be seemingly scrapped again. Enemy HP bars and the bars above the active character's head are not visible at all in this trailer. One possibility could be that those only appear when either having the Sense material equipped or having used the Sense command on an enemy. I do hope for the latter, as that coincides with the original's handling of the Sense ability. In any case, I think it's a better choice not to show enemy HP at all times, as that only clutters the screen and renders the Sense material useless. Maybe we also see elemental weaknesses and current status effects above the enemy's HP bar after using Sense on them. And last but not least, have you noticed this little difference in the UI between battle and field mode? It seems to switch between looking like a static overlay and integrating itself nicely into the action by applying a slight foreshortening. I expect a smooth transition between the 2 modes when entering and exiting battles. With the UI analysis out of the way, Let's now go through every battle scene one by looking at movement, attacks, damage, enemy behavior and changes happening in the UI to get a better idea for how the new combat system feels like. The very first battle scene shown in this trailer is taking place during the fight against Guard Scorpion. Unfortunately, we only see a mid-battle cutscene lacking any sorts of interaction, but we can still glean a few things from it. Battle progression is halted during this cutscene. Barret's second ATB bar segment is halfway full and neither increases nor depletes. Another explanation could be that wait mode is active, though I think it's more likely that such cutscenes stop ATB progression in all scenarios. What I find curious, however, is that all interactive UI elements don't appear disabled. Are we still able to input attack commands or open the commands menu? If so, I suppose nothing will happen. Maybe an unavailable icon appears, like the crossed out finger cursor in the original when trying to input commands during such a cinematic cutscene, like summon animations for example. Since both Cloud and Barret are fully healed up, this scene either takes place at the start of the battle or the player healed both back to full HP before triggering the scene. One theory could be that the encounter seen in the PSX 2015 trailer takes place higher up, and the cinematic scene marks the beginning of the second battle against the Guard Scorpion when reaching the pressure regulator to place the bomb. That's about everything I can find in this scene, so let's move on to the first real battle scene. Here, our beloved trio is trekking through the Sector 4 subway tunnels toward reactor number 5. Unfortunately, we never see Tifa in action, so we'll have to settle with Cloud and Barret, and the latter starts with unloading a continuous stream of bullets onto the drone enemy to the right. There are numerous damage numbers appearing in very short succession to each other, so let me slow it down for you. Unfortunately, we don't know how many more hits preceded the cut to this scene, but from what we see here, Barret deals at least 59 points of damage. While most hits don't exceed 3 points of damage, the penultimate one goes up to 4, with the final blow dealing a whole 15 points of damage. It looks like the last hit of a combo always deals the highest amount of damage, which acts as an incentive to finish combos, producing a classic risk and reward system. We also see how critical hits are handled visually. Next to this additional glare effect, the term critical is displayed on top of the critical damage number pop-up. As established in the UI analysis, it looks like the player is holding down triangle for the backblast attack. Though this attack looks more like Barret's normal attack, but let's postpone this inconclusive problem for later. As already seen in the PSX 2015 trailer, Barret can slowly move around while firing at the target. The same applies to Cloud, who's currently in blocking mode in the background. Cloud is facing the enemy Barret is currently attacking, which in turn is probably facing Cloud. It's practically impossible to tell the direction the drone is facing with the lack of an orientation indicator and all the hit effects covering the enemy. It doesn't attack Cloud yet and seems to slightly react to Barret's continuous shots by shaking a little. Still, it continues to fly upward, so there seems no hit stun involved. Barret's last hit might cause hit stun, but it's hard to see and thus inconclusive. The other drone to the left flies upward unimpeded and prepares a laser attack aimed at Barret, as indicated by the red laser pointer dot on Barret. This is a clear indicator to start blocking immediately, or dodging out of the way if that's even a thing. What strikes me as odd is that the drone enemies seem to rely on their leg jets for hovering around the place. However, as soon as the left one gets into position for its laser attack, it stays afloat without any jet devices pointing downward. Maybe an anti-gravity module keeps it afloat, while the mini-jets on its legs are used for acceleration and steering. What I do find interesting, however, is that the drone's maneuverability brings it out of melee range while preparing for its laser attack. Cloud and Tifa won't be able to reach the drone using normal attacks, so they'll have to resort to magic. Meanwhile, Barret can just keep firing to knock that bird down to earth, making his combat style a valuable strategic tool in such battles, at least until the long-range material becomes available. I forgot to mention this in the first part of this trailer analysis, but there is evidence for this second scene taking place after the previous one. The HP of Cloud and Barret are lower than before, and their limit bars manage to fill up completely in the meantime. Tifa seems to have healed herself up after being heavily damaged, as her higher limit bar indicates. I believe that the developers set her AI to not engage at all and to only heal herself to allow them to gather enough footage without her constantly trying to steal the spotlight. This observation also gives me hope for decent AI behavior options. Anyway, let's move on to what's actually happening on screen. Here, we see Cloud attacking the poor camouflaged MP lying prone on the ground, possibly as a result from a previously executed strong attack from either Cloud or Tifa, as Barret seems to have been busy making Swiss cheese out of the drone further back. Cloud's previous hit dealt 91 points of damage and probably hit the MP in midair according to its high position, since damage numbers seem to originate around the center of an enemy. This next hit deals a whopping 618 damage. Since the enemy lies prone and is therefore vulnerable to attacks, I presume both numbers represent double damage, bringing the actual damage numbers down to 45 and 308. In the first part of this trailer analysis, I told you that this attack Cloud performs here is the new version of his first limit break, Braver. While analyzing the combat system, I came to a different conclusion. However, I'll cover that towards the end of this analysis, as some details for understanding my conclusion have not been covered yet and I'm trying to not jump all over the place. Just a little hint for now. One ATB charge has been consumed, but the limit bar is still full to the brim, even though Braver is supposed to be a limit break. Anyway, let's now look at the attack itself. Before the hit connects, the MP tries to get up again but is too slow and gets swatted by Cloud's Buster Sword. The enemy is staggered and gets pushed back upon impact. Either this is due to the high hit stun potential of this attack, or simply because the enemy was lying prone and in a vulnerable state. Unfortunately, we don't see if this attack kills the enemy or not. Though it doesn't look like the MP starts dropping to the ground again, but instead tries to compose himself. Now back to Barret. He piles on the drone enemy with the same barrage of bullets seen in the previous scene. This is indicated by ending the combo with the same 15 points of damage, the same animation and overheated muscles, the same hit effect consisting of a smoky blast and the same red string-like heat smudge. The other damage numbers are still the same, with the exception of those 4 big orange ones which appear to describe some sort of double damage. There's too little to go on for now, so let's analyze those later in this video when more information is available. Again, the numbers look like a jumbled mess, so let me slow things down for you and break them down. Like in the previous scene, we don't see how many hits preceded this cut, but we're already looking at 48 points of damage. What's interesting is Barret's movement after finishing his attack. First, we see the recoil animation finish right here. At this point, another animation starts, which presumably leads back to his idle animation. During that, Barret starts dashing towards the enemy and suddenly stops again. One possibility could be that Barret's AI started an attack with a closer range, as indicated by the dash animation, but then changes his mind due to changing parameters on the battlefield, causing Barret to stop in his tracks to adjust to the new situation. Okay, this is going too far, so before we all lose our sanity, let's move on to the next battle scene. We're now in the sewers below Don Corneo's mansion in the Sector 6 slums fighting a Sahagin. This scene starts off with Cloud starting a normal attack after blocking 2 hits from one of Sahagin's attacks, possibly its water gun dealing 184 and 43 points of damage for a total of 227. I say blocked because that term is attached to both damage number pop-ups. I think it's good to see blocking doesn't completely negate damage, but instead cuts it in half. We have evidence for that in the next scene. If Cloud didn't block, he would have suffered 454 points of damage, almost a quarter of his maximum HP. The Sahagin's water gun attack, or whatever it was, seems quite strong and blocking becomes important in this situation, unless the smaller damage number comes from a normal attack by another Sahagin currently outside of the viewport. Speaking of the Sahagin, that little sleazy guy is in the process of jumping backwards to get away from Cloud after delivering its attack. No matter, because Cloud still uses his signature dash move to close the gap between him and his target, practically identical to the original game. Now follows a 3-hit combo attack against the Sahagin, dealing 105 points of damage total. There are several things to take note of. First, the player pressed square right before the cut to this scene, according to the effect seen on the normal attack button. We also see Cloud in the middle of the transition from his block stance to his dash move. That dash move looks to be automatic and guided to the locked on target. Right before the first hit connects, the player hits square again, which causes Cloud to start the second sword swing right after the main animation for the first swing ends. Shortly after the second swing starts, the player hits square a third time, and exactly as Cloud ends the second swing animation and starts with the third, the player presses square again due to impatience. Then Cloud finishes the combo with a strong finishing cleaver, dealing the most damage out of all 3 hits. What's interesting here is that Cloud's sword swings are mirrored in its trailer compared to the PSX 2015 trailer and the 4x hit attack in the original. Instead of slashing from the upper right down to the lower left, Cloud starts from the upper left instead. The second swing is also a horizontal one, but again with its direction mirrored. Then he completely skips the upward swing and goes right for the downwards cleave. Since the PSX 2015 trailer featured a minimum of a 7-hit combo, I think the base combo count of 3 can be increased by either equipping specific materia or better weapons. Maybe each weapon has its own attack combo pattern, although I somewhat doubt that due to the huge amount of animation and balancing work this would entail. When comparing the hit effect, it looks quite similar to the original, just with added sparks flying off into the opposite direction. What I also noticed is that the Sahagin is never hit-stunned or staggered by any of the attacks. It might look like that during the third hit, but if you look closely or watch in slow motion, we can clearly see the Sahagin jumping backwards on its own volition. In this scene, Aerith also does her part in taking down this water-squirting nuisance. Like Cloud, she seems to perform a 3-hit combo, though instead of swinging an oversized sword, she gracefully swings her staff while shooting homing energy blasts towards the target. If the first hit we see was also the first hit in her combo, we're definitely dealing with a 3-hit combo. After the third hit, her staff stops glowing. With a total of 100 points of damage, her damage output lies a little lower than Cloud's 105. Her third hit also deals more damage than the previous hit. Unlike the original, her normal attack changed from a single melee hit to shooting several magic balls of light from a distance, which makes much more sense in an action RPG system, with her being a glass cannon and all. Maybe the damage formula for that attack even uses her magic stat instead of strength, though I think that would be too much of an anomaly. Like with Cloud, the hit effect of her attack looks quite similar to the one in the original, though the effect here looks less like a light explosion and more like a magic sphere with a flower pattern around the inner border. Unfortunately, that's all I have for you in regard to Aerith for now. Moving on to the next enemy. This encounter with the cutter machine reveals a few more interesting details. Again, we see Barret doing what Barret does best. Leroy Jenkins! I mean, unloading a whole Gatling clip into the enemy's face. This time, his bullet stream gets abruptly interrupted by the cutter machine's Sawblade swirl attack, staggering Barret and throwing him to the ground, which is why we only reach 32 points of damage this time. More if you count potential hits before the cut to this scene. While there's no hit stun, again, the target, the left Sawblade, shakes a little on impact. During the cutter machine's Sawblade swirl attack, the following things happen. The right Sawblade arm starts off being turned backwards to increase momentum on the blade impact. Barret takes a full damage of 241 and is knocked down to the ground. He rolls over backwards and lands in a poor 3-point landing stance. During the few remaining frames before he goes out of sight, we don't see him standing up, which is why I assume being knocked prone takes a second or two until the victim is able to stand up again. Cloud, on the other hand, manages to block the attack and takes half damage with 144 points. He still gets pushed back and almost loses composure. Not sure what would happen if another enemy attacked Cloud during this time frame. Maybe the block status is temporarily inactive. When doubling Cloud's half damage, we learn that Barret has a higher defense due to his 241 points of damage compared to Cloud's 288. That's too large of a gap for it to be mere damage variance. In addition to taking damage, we see the limit bar of both increasing a little, just like in the original. What's very interesting though is that Cloud merely blocking fills up the second ATB charge. In the first frame, we don't see a glow on the second ATB charge, as it's not quite filled up yet. In the very next frame, the whole charge lights up in a bright blue flash, and so does Cloud's body. Now we know how it looks when the ATB charge gets filled up. I didn't expect blocking to increase the ATB gauge of all things. I'll get into that a bit later when covering the new ATB system. As in the first battle scene in the tunnels, we see Cloud slowly walking or strafing around while having block engaged. After the cutter machine's attack finishes, the player starts hammering the square button frantically, with a total of 6 times, to direct Cloud to attack the enemy. We again witness the same dash movement from the original game. Cloud's combo looks the same as in the Sahagin battle, so nothing new to glean here. However, we do see the target reticule switch from the center body to the right Sawblade arm in the same frame Cloud starts his attack animation. Either this uncanny timing is pure coincidence, or we're still in a soft lock-on state which automatically targets the closest available target when attacking. Unfortunately, we don't see the full combo, but the first hit, 26, deals exactly the same amount of damage as the one against the Sahagin while being a critical hit, so effectively only 13. The second hit is also smaller, 13 instead of 16, although this could be attributed to damage variance. It's hard to tell how far the damage variance ranges in this build, though it looks like the cutter machine does have a higher defense than the Sahagin. When Cloud hits the cutter machine's Sawblade, they do seem to bounce a little, though I think that's just a matter of realistic feedback and not due to hit stun. An interesting detail is that Cloud hits the other Sawblade arm, which is not targeted, but receives the damage anyway because it was in the way of the Buster-Sword's swing trajectory. However, the actual target doesn't take any damage, which leads me to believe that hitting multiple targets with one weapon attack might only be possible with multiple enemies situated along the weapon's path of destruction, while ignoring additional limbs of one enemy. The penultimate scene to go through covers Barret's Big Shot. We don't see how the player activates it, as they're just holding down the triangle button, which certainly doesn't activate any limit break. My guess is that the player holds down triangle to immediately start firing at the enemy once Big Shot finishes. As to how limit breaks are activated, I suppose there's a dedicated menu option in the commands menu as established in the UI analysis earlier in this video. Naturally, as seen with Braver, any limit break can be put into the shortcut menu for quick and easy access. Further evidence for this being a classic limit break scenario is that Barret currently has an empty limit bar and both ATB charges are still at full capacity, proving that limit breaks only use up the limit bar and don't require any ATB charge to be executed. This indicates that limit breaks are meant to be executed at any time, similar to the original, where limit breaks, once selected, receive priority over any other action currently queued up. We've also seen that damage received builds up the limit bar. While I'm fond of the different ways you can configure the overdrive gauge gain in Final Fantasy X, I believe it's best for the Final Fantasy VII Remake to remain faithful to its original blueprint and thus stay true to the lore. Remember the tutorial room in the Sector 7 slums? There, Cloud teaches the little girl how to best the stronger boy beating on her by utilizing the limit break system. One thing is certain, the small arrow next to the attack menu option seen in the first Magic 2017 screenshot has come and gone. With physical attacks now mapped to dedicated buttons, that Final Fantasy VIII-like concept has no place anymore, unfortunately. Unlike the original game, Big Shot damages the enemy twice this time around. 244 and 484 points of damage respectively, bringing the whole attack to a total of 728. There's the initial hit and the delayed explosion which potentially damages enemies close by, as the shockwave effect nearby objects suggests. Additionally, the first hit staggers the enemy while the second hit literally blows up the enemy into the air. It's astonishing that I didn't catch this gem in the first part of this trailer analysis. Whether this poor Crash Strike survives this fatal attack, however, remains forever a mystery. In the last scene, we see Cloud showing off his second limit break, Cross Slash, which functions the same in terms of resource consumption. It consumes a full limit bar while the ATB charges stay untouched. In contrast to Barret, no attack buttons are pressed during this attack. Like in the original version, Cross Slash consists of 3 hits, but unlike the original counterpart, each one of those 3 hits deal damage, 233, 155 and 751 respectively, resulting in 1139 points of total damage, 411 more than Big Shot. This makes sense since Big Shot is the first level 1 limit break, while Cross Slash is the second one. I wonder if there's still a chance to stun the enemy with this attack. I certainly hope so. Taking a closer look at those 3 hits, we see that the first 2 stagger the enemy while the third one sends it flying against the fence. It's hard to see, but when following the movement of its tail, it becomes a bit clearer. During Barret's Big Shot, Cloud already has a full limit bar and is controlled by the AI. Still, he doesn't use it on his own. Maybe the AI does not use limit breaks at all, or we're able to granularly configure the character AI, which I hope will be the case. Before we finish up this part of the analysis, I have a few more details to cover. Between Barret's Big Shot and Cloud's Cross Slash, both of them lost some HP. Barret's HP loss also caused his emptied out limit bar by previously using Big Shot to start filling up again. Meanwhile, Tifa didn't take any damage at all and didn't gain any mileage on her limit meter either. Was she standing around sucking on her thumb the whole time? This is more evidence of the developers fiddling with her AI settings to keep out of fights and thus staying clear of the viewport. Remember folks, we're saving Tifa for the big presentation in June, you guys! Another point I forgot to mention in the previous part of this trailer analysis pertains to the different camera angles in both limit break shots. We're still in the very same area, just closer to the fence, as the same plank piles, crates and silk webs can be seen in both shots. Though I think Cloud is slashing up a different Crash Strike since Barret most likely took care of the first one. Phew, that's it for the individual battle scenes. Now it's time to go through several remaining details not tied to specific scenes. Alright, it's now time to analyze the new ATB system, as this trailer provides further hints in addition to the previous material and thus sheds more light on how ATB works. However, most points I discuss and explain here are highly speculative, as there's still too little to go on. The currently available ATB charges are always displayed in the context of the commands menu, and as there's no cost indicator visible yet, I assume that each command costs only 1 ATB charge. Of course, it could be that items don't require an ATB charge to be used, which is why we don't see any indicators in the shortcut menu. Limit breaks also don't use up ATB charges as already established. But how will we gain any ATB charges in the first place? In the PSX 2015 trailer, consecutive normal attacks build up the gauge, which degrades over time again if no hit lands within a second or so. And in this trailer, merely blocking increases the ATB gauge. It's possible that ATB is now gained over time, like in the original. This makes sense since healing also uses ATB charges. Forcing the player to constantly attack to being able to heal seems too punishing. Another possibility is that there's slow ATB gain over time in addition to a faster gain while using normal attacks. This encourages using riskier and weaker attacks to being able to use stronger attacks and healing faster. However, maybe only blocking slowly increases ATB over time. During blocking, the character can only move very slowly and still takes half the damage. This encourages the player to stay in the fray and not running or dodging away constantly. Besides blocking increasing ATB, there's no other occasion in this trailer where ATB increases. However, we do know about two situations where ATB doesn't increase: Cloud Somersault Cleaver attack and during the Guard Scorpion Missile Barrage cutscene. While both could be the result of wait mode, I think the reason for Cloud's attack not increasing the ATB gauge is because he used a command which does use up an ATB charge and doesn't contribute to ATB gain. We already discussed the Guard Scorpion scene, so we'll continue forward. In the end, there are only two feasible options: ATB gained over time or ATB gained by engagement. ATB gain over time would reflect the original battle system perfectly. There, ATB speed is dependent on character speed and speed modifiers such as haste and slow. Square and triangle attacks are freebies for chip damage and strategic staggering and action interruptions, while all actions used from the commands menu, with the exception of limit breaks, cost 1 or more ATB charges each. I think this is less likely. For one, there's no ATB gain during Cloud Somersault Cleaver attack, unless that's because ATB is set to wait, though I don't think that's the case. ATB gain by engagement, on the other hand, provides a completely different dynamic and combat experience. Besides using square and triangle attacks, blocking also provides a slow ATB gain. All actions from the commands menu, including limit breaks, don't increase the ATB gauge at all. Additionally, there's a slow ATB loss when not connecting successive attack hits quickly enough. However, the ATB gauge never drops below the current charge and full charges never deplete automatically. This concept forces the player to keep engaging actively in battle by attacking and blocking to be able to use ATB charges for more effective actions and healing. Furthermore, managing ATB charges becomes more relevant because we'll have to work for getting them back. For example, do I use all ATB charges for magic attacks or do I save one for a quick heal? Having established both options, I found several detriments for an ATB gain over time. For one, it provides no strategical advantages. You wait and then use commands. For another, it feels rather cheap since it's possible to camp at the edge of the battlefield and spam magic and ethers or other long-range attacks. It also diminishes the significance of the standard attack loop consisting of normal and heavy attacks as well as blocking. Sure, you're able to freely attack and dish out chip damage while waiting for the ATB gauge to fill up, but this feels more like killing time until you can use the cool stuff. And lastly, there's way less risk and reward involved. That being said, I sincerely hope they are going for the ATB gained by engagement system as opposed to ATB gained over time. The former sounds way more interesting and engaging, hence why I named it as such. As described above, all actions used from the commands menu cost at least one ATB charge in addition to the already inherent cost. Magic and summons cost therefore ATB and MP, while yellow materia commands use up only ATB. Items on the other hand cost 1 unit in addition to 1 ATB charge. But why should all commands cost ATB even if they already have inherent costs? Isn't that too restrictive? One reason is that the additional ATB cost for magic, summons and items prevent spamming strong and effective actions. The additional MP cost is not enough to prevent spamming magic and summons as long as there are ethers in the inventory. The same goes for items because they can usually be easily farmed. Couple that with the previous point and you can spam magic and summons all day, especially if the latter are mastered. And remember, in the original game, magic, summons and items cost ATB in addition to MP and units. You just have to wait in order to perform an action. And here's another thought. If magic, summons and items don't use ATB, what's left? Yellow materia commands only? That doesn't make any sense, especially regarding the UI design. Moreover, having a dedicated bar for just one small subset of actions would be overkill and confusing. Now let's go over a few miscellaneous thoughts about ATB. What if there's an option in the settings menu where we can switch between the two ATB variants I just presented? Like Remake and Classic? I bet that would put many fans of the original game to ease. Just one last thought before we move on to the next topic. Yes, there's more. As described at the start of the analysis, there's room for up to 6 ATB charges underneath the commands menu prompt, as well as inside the commands menu. Will the characters get more charges by leveling up, by equipping specific materia or weapons? I don't think we'll be stuck with only 2 charges forever, but we'll have to wait and see. Now, there are still several elements remaining, which this trailer doesn't give enough information on for a conclusive analysis. Some evidence is even contradicting. Let's start off with Braver. I told you earlier that I'll cover this Braver confusion later, so here it is. Limit breaks cost a full limit bar as seen during Big Shot and Cross Slash. The attack performed here, however, does not empty the limit bar but rather consumes 1 ATB charge. It makes therefore little sense for this attack to represent Braver. Cloud's first limit break, since Big Shot, Barret's first limit break, is still depleting the full limit bar while no ATB charge is used. The damage number of this attack with a base damage of 309 is rather low and thus not comparable to Barret's Big Shot, which happens soon after. So it's definitely not Braver we're seeing here. But why do we see Braver in the shortcut menu here? Probably the best explanation is that the player opens the shortcut menu right after executing this attack seen here and is now about to continue their attack string with Braver or wants to throw in a potion. Cloud is only at around half HP after all, and Barret's even worse for wear. But what kind of attack are we seeing here? It could be Cloud's triangle attack Punisher, but there are a few problems with this option. Triangle attacks do not use up any ATB charge, as the UI design wouldn't make sense otherwise. Cloud should gain ATB if anything, which isn't the case here either. Unless Cloud just happens to have only 1 charge and ATB increases over time, and Wait mode is currently active, where ATB gain halts during any action not being normal square attack. Though this seems rather unlikely. One possibility could be that limit breaks are also usable as normal commands, depleting 1 ATB charge instead of the limit bar, and in turn their effectiveness is halved. But this sounds rather complicated and not design choice. The only possibility left is a yellow materia command, something like Deathblow, which uses up an ATB charge, which is exactly what happens here. I think this scenario is the most likely one, since we probably obtain yellow materia much earlier in the remake due to bigger locations and an overall different progression. I might still be wrong, but we are in desperate need of more conclusive evidence to really know what's going on here. Backblast is another odd one with too little reference material to reach a satisfying conclusion. Let's give it a try anyway. When discussing the attack buttons earlier, we've established that the player is holding down triangle in this scene as evidenced by the constant pressed state of the button with the regular interaction flash racing across. There are 2 scenes where we see Barret being controlled by the player and where the backblast button is being held down. Barret uses different attacks in both scenes however. A stream of bullets in the first and Big Shot in the second scene. The attack in the first scene looks very similar to Barret's normal attack as seen in the PSX trailer. In this trailer, however, we never see the normal attack button being pressed when the player controls Barret. It could be that only the last hit dealing 15 points of damage represents the backblast attack, and the player just holds triangle to have it immediately executed after the last hit of the normal attack combo. This means that pressing triangle during another action would do nothing, or else the backblast would have been activated much earlier. But not being able to interrupt normal attacks to quickly change strategies or react to incoming attacks sounds like bad combat design. I was also thinking of the possibility that each time the blue flash races across the bar, it counts as a button press. This way, every 25 frames, holding down a button simulates a new button press. But if that's true, we don't see that in action as nothing in particular changes when that blue flash starts racing across, so that idea has gone down the drain. However, the hold down the button system might only apply to Barret due to how his weapon works. It doesn't seem to apply to Cloud anyway, or else the player would not repeatedly press the attack button. With that in mind, the backblast attack might cause Barret to fire away as long as the triangle button is pressed, or until a maximum amount of shots are reached, and then finishes off with a bigger blast resulting in a recoil animation shown here. But why is backblast pressed during Big Shot? The player probably activated Big Shot and immediately went back to holding down triangle to keep firing after Big Shot finishes. But how does backblast differ from Barret's normal attack? The normal attack might only unleash a single shot or a single batch of bullets, triplets for example, when pressing the normal attack button. Could normal attack be close range only while backblast acts as the long range counterpart? If so, this would be a feature exclusive for Barret, as this concept doesn't make much sense for most of the cast. Other characters might have other differentiations between their normal and heavy attack. Whatever backblast turns out to be, let's wait for E3 for more conclusive observations. While keeping the topic on heavy triangle attacks, let's quickly talk about Aerith. Her normal attack from the original consists of jumping towards the enemy and hitting it over the head with her stick. Maybe that represents her heavy attack when having the guard stick equipped. It would deal high damage in one hit, but will be risky as the glass cannon doesn't fare well in close range combat. Her triangle attack might also be related to healing, for example a quick but weak self-heal. We haven't seen Tifa in action yet, so I'll postpone any speculation to her reveal trailer, as we'll only be blindly wading through guesswork and this video is already way too long. Let's therefore move on and talk about targeting. The targeting reticule is always visible in this trailer and doesn't change its appearance. Does this represent an automatic soft lock on, or is the player always actively locking onto the target? Compared to previous iterations, it received a slight redesign each time. From the PSX 2015 trailer to the Magic 2017 screenshot, the only additions are the 4 diagonally orientated horns at the top and the bottom. From there to this trailer, however, a few more changes have been done. The outer lines turned to white, and the double arrows in the middle of both sides are gone. The 4 horns are moving out and inwards in a loop, and the center now displays additional crosshairs. As suggested earlier, we'll probably be using the R1 shoulder button to lock onto a target while switching between targets with either the right analog stick or the left and right directional buttons. Some enemies expose multiple target points, which we already knew from interviews. This allows to incapacitate the limbs and deactivate certain attacks. The original already played around with that concept. Remember Carry Armor, Schizo, Grosspanzer and Yin and Yang? All of those were single enemies consisting of multiple parts and lost abilities after we disposed of those additional parts. In this trailer, we get the glimpse of such an enemy, the Cutter Machine, which exposes 3 targets, its body and both Sawblade arms. Disposing of one Sawblade arm possibly limits its moveset, presumably deactivating its Sawblade spin attack. Disposing of both Sawblade arms reduces its effectivity to almost nothing, leaving it with maybe a smoke and a stomp attack. But how will targeting work in detail? We don't know, so the following propositions are pure speculation. Since the targeting reticule never changes appearance, we're either constantly in soft or hard lock-on mode. The only evidence for it possibly being an automatic soft lock-on mode is the target change during the Cutter Machine battle. As noted earlier, in the very same frame Cloud transitions from his defensive stance to his attack animation, the targeting reticule switches from the Cutter Machine's main body to its right Sawblade arm. This has to be happening automatically since the player already started pressing attack before this frame, and the chance they manually change targets during that very frame is nigh 0. I therefore speculate that the game always targets the closest enemy automatically when not performing any action. As soon as the player enters the defensive stance or starts another maneuver, the current target becomes automatically locked until the character finishes the current action or the player manually changes targets. When we look at every other battle scene in this trailer, this theory holds up. This means we never see hard lock on being used. But what's hard lock on being used for and how do we activate it? Hard lock on would ensure the target stays the same no matter what the character does and how and to where they traverse on the battlefield. The camera would then also be locked and centered on the target. Since this sounds like a toggle, R3 would be the best suited candidate for switching between soft and hard lock on. Using a toggle instead of having to hold down a button for hard lock on mode makes more sense for this battle system from a usability standpoint. Since there's a dedicated button for opening the command menu, having to keep pressing R1 while opening and navigating that menu as to not lose the hard lock-on mode sounds very cumbersome. A toggle button makes things much easier. The R1 button is therefore up for grabs again, and becomes a great candidate for blocking, which is incidentally our next subject. At first, I imagined blocking being done by holding down the X button, but having R1 available again, I believe that one is much better suited. With R1, it's much easier to seamlessly open the commands menu or start attacking with square or triangle. The PSX 2015 trailer contained a defensive option directly in the commands menu. This makes no sense at all and appears cumbersome, which is why we're now able to block with the press of a button instead. Unlike in Kingdom Hearts, where blocking only lasts for about a second, is very much dependent on good timing and negates damage completely, blocking in the remake seems continuous and only halves incoming damage. It therefore feels very similar to the original's defense command, with the difference of not being tied to turns. Blocking also doesn't seem to consume any resources and can be used at will. On the contrary, blocking generates resources, namely ATB. They might also add new independent materia, which further reduces damage taken while blocking. I mentioned dodging a few times in passing. While there are no hints towards dodging even being a thing in the Final Fantasy VII Remake whatsoever, I do think it would have some merit to include a dodge mechanic. In Kingdom Hearts, dodging is performed by pressing square while moving around. This could work the same way here, just with R1 instead. Dodging allows to avoid damage completely, though it doesn't increase ATB at all and rather lets it deplete due to not being able to attack the enemy. Another element that has not been featured at all either is a jumping mechanic. Both Final Fantasy XV and Kingdom Hearts featured jumping, but had also rather floaty combat systems, which I think the remake will and should not have. I therefore believe jumping will not be a thing in the remake, at least not freely. Predetermined jumping points activated by using the interaction button will most likely stay in, as the original game already featured such interaction points during traversal. While the X button would be available, I think that one is better suited for interactions only. We all know what happens when you map both jump and interaction to the same button. We established practically the whole button mapping on the controller so far, though some of the mapping is pure speculation. To save some time, I'm leaving an informative graphic on the screen for you to inspect by pausing this video for a moment. We still have a few interesting things to cover, so let's keep on pressing forward. I saved the probably most interesting inconclusive element for last. What are those orange damage numbers for anyway? Wait, how is that any more interesting than the ATB analysis? Just bear with me and you'll see why. We know that they seem to designate double damage. During Cloud's somersault cleaver attack, we see several orange numbers from Barret's bullet stream fade away just as the trailer cuts to that scene. A 6, a critical 5, a 2, and another 6. Since his normal damage numbers usually range from 1 to 3, this range of 2 to 6 makes this case very clear. The critical 5 is most likely a 1 doubled twice. Wait, what? Well, more like a 1.3 or something, which usually gets rounded down to 1, but makes a difference when multiplied. 1.3 times 4 equals 5.2, which gets rounded down to 5. We also see orange damage numbers during the Cutter Machine's Sawblade Spin attack. We don't have any reference here, but I assume those are also double damage. We do however see that Barret's attack combo is interrupted. He gets thrown to the ground and Cloud gets staggered despite blocking the attack. Before I reveal my conclusion, let's go through all possibilities which ended in a dead end. Critical hits are already specifically labeled, so that one's out of the question. It also can't be a blindside attack since Barret and Cloud are facing the Cutter Machine while receiving orange damage. Unblockable damage is also easily debunked. Cloud can certainly block the Cutter Machine attack, and blocked damage from the Sahagin is also halved and not negated. Furthermore, none of Barret's bullet hits are unblockable. It can't be prone damage either since neither Barret nor Cloud are prone when receiving the Cutter Machine's attack damage. Additionally, that camouflaged MP is lying prone and receives white damage. While it might be some sort of special attack damage in case of the Cutter Machine, parts of Barret's bullet range certainly don't constitute as special attacks, and Cloud's special attack doesn't produce orange numbers either. Neither do limit breaks. Lastly, we can also exclude damage from attacks causing pushback. Cloud's somersault cleaver attack pushes the MP back and produces white numbers, and Barret's orange numbered hits against the drone in the background didn't push back that drone. While we're still in the realm of speculation, I see only one option making sense, and that's stagger or hit stun damage, specifically when interrupting the target. When observing the drone enemy during Barret's barrage of bullets very closely, it doesn't look affected at first, but then starts reacting to every single hit. This indicates staggering. But why aren't those damage numbers orange? Because the drone isn't in the process of attacking or blocking, but is instead just moving around. There's nothing to interrupt. We don't see it unfortunately, but the drone in the second tunnel scene was most likely in the process of either attacking or blocking when Barret's continuous stream of attack managed to stagger and interrupt the drone. Looking very closely again, we can see a similar stagger animation in both tunnel scenes. While the drone example isn't enough to solidify my theory, look no further than the Cutter Machine attack. There, Barret does get both staggered and interrupted, and so does Cloud. As I already pointed out earlier in this video, Cloud's animation suggests his blocking stance is temporarily interrupted, possibly making him vulnerable to normal damage until he can recompose himself. However, when comparing the fade-out moment of this blocked damage to those against the Sahagin, we're looking at the exact same duration between Cloud getting hit and starting his own attack. So I'm not sure if this hit animation while blocking is always the same, or if staggered while blocking takes the same amount of time until taking action becomes possible, compared to receiving normal damage while blocking. Now, with the verdict of there being a stagger mechanic involved, we've just opened a whole other can of worms. My theory is that every attack has a certain stagger potential, with normal attacks being low, heavy attacks moderate, materia abilities high, and limit breaks the highest. This means that you need to perform many single normal attack hits until the enemy gets staggered, while only one limit break will suffice. Different enemies would then have different stagger capacities. The Cutter Machine, for example, would need more hits than the Sahagin and the drone enemy, while bigger enemies like the weapons would be immune to being staggered or hit stunned altogether. Harkening back to the cooldown, I believe that Barret will be hit by the other drone's laser attack due to the cooldown of Barret's backblast not being done in time for starting to block or dodge out of the way. While establishing this theory, I'm now even more convinced that Barret's bullet rain attacks in both tunnel scenes do in fact represent backblast, as the target staggers rather quickly in both scenes, which probably wouldn't be the case if Barret was using the normal attack. In addition to simply interrupting actions, advanced players can up their game by stun locking enemies. You time your attacks with those performed by an AI character to hit stun the enemy again before they recover from the last hit stunning attack. Smart character switching then allows for stringing hit stunning attacks together for an extensive stun lock combo. Square Enix already incorporated such an approach in Final Fantasy X-2 and it worked quite well. To conclude this segment, the stagger theory is the only one that makes sense with the little data we currently have at hand. Or I'm just reading too much into it yet again and the orange damage numbers only indicate interrupted actions. I guess we'll see. After having inspected every single detail, let's try to create a coherent picture of how this new battle system might work. Keep in mind that most of this segment is still highly speculative. Let's start with the new ATB concept. Square attack deals chip damage and builds up ATB, but has a low stagger potential. Risky, ineffective, but crucial to building resources. Triangle attack is used for higher damage, better stagger potential as well as ATB buildup, but causes a short cooldown afterward where other actions and maybe even moving and blocking are restricted. It's less risky and more efficient, builds up resources but leaves the character vulnerable. Blocking additionally slowly builds up ATB and halves any incoming physical damage. A slower but safer option to build up resources. ATB depletes over time after not connecting consecutive hits, but filled up ATB charges remain intact. Dodging, if even included in the remake, avoids damage completely, but doesn't increase your ATB gauge and unfinished ATB charges will start to deplete. A safe but very inefficient alternative. Best used at full ATB or when on low health. The decision to have blocking also build up ATB is a great one in my opinion. That way, you're able to attack the enemy, quickly switch into a defensive stance to block any incoming attack, and then continue with your attack chain until the ATB gauge is filled up. And all of this without once breaking the ATB build-up chain. And thanks to the low staggering rate of normal attacks, blocking becomes all the more important. This creates an engaging attack loop consisting of continuously attacking and blocking while building up ATB to be able to pull out the big guns with magic and summons. Let's quickly go over how resources are used. Yellow materia commands and items cost 1 ATB charge. Costly, but more effective than attacking normally. Magic and summons cost MP in addition to 1 ATB charge. Very costly but also very effective in terms of damage, especially when exploiting enemy weaknesses. Another type of resource is the limit bar, which increases by receiving damage. Limit breaks use up a full limit bar, but don't require an ATB charge. They work outside of the main ATB loop and present a great help in a pinch and act as sweet revenge. Some fans fear that the new action approach takes control away from them by only being able to control one character at a time. I don't think it's that bad, so let me try to disperse those fears. In this trailer, ATB and limit gauges are completely full most of the time or in the process of filling up. If any of those gauges are empty, it happens for the player-controlled character as seen in the second tunnel scene with Cloud where 1 ATB charge is empty. Additionally, the limit bar is only partially filled in the first tunnel scene because that's taking place at the very beginning of this area. The second tunnel scene has 2 limit bars filled up and 1 not quite yet, presumably because no limit breaks have been used yet. A bit later in the game when fighting the Crash Tracks, Barret's and Cloud's limit bars only deplete because the player activated their limit breaks. In the battle against the Cutter Machine, no limit bar is filled up and Aerith also ignores her full limit bar in the sewers. I therefore speculate that AI-controlled characters use ATB and limit breaks only according to AI settings in the main menu. So if you don't want them to use up any resource-consuming actions, just set the AI accordingly. That way, the player retains full control over the party, with the exception of the normal attack loop, which doesn't matter much in the grand scheme of things to be frank. Furthermore, character switching can be done at any time. It's advised to regularly switch between characters to efficiently utilize full ATB charges on all characters. This heavily depends on how AI is handled and how much control we'll have over the AI behavior. In short, using normal and heavy attacks in conjunction with blocking builds up ATB charges, which in turn are used for all other actions, effectively restricting spamming anything else outside of the normal attack loop. This means we're looking at a combat system which plays very similar to the original, but instead of waiting for the ATB bar to fill up and watching our characters take damage, we can actively block incoming attacks and dish out damage ourselves, while simultaneously building up ATB charges for more effective actions. This is in line with how Nomura-san described the battle system in an interview. There, he was talking about a stress-free battle, that the tempo lies below Dissidia and Kingdom Hearts, and that there are no techniques necessary. Sounds very much like our established combat system, doesn't it? One huge advantage this new battle system has over the original ATB system is that each character seems to feel very different in battle. Cloud is the typical sword swinger, using wide and violent swings and dealing comparatively higher damage. Barret fires a constant stream of bullets against his target with a higher possibility to interrupt attacks due to the myriad of combo hits, but in turn deals less raw damage. Furthermore, Barret might also draw more aggro due to the severely higher hit count. This makes sense regarding his HP value being higher than the rest, making him a great tank. Aerith shoots energy balls against enemies from a safe distance with lesser damage and hopefully generating less aggro than Barret's bullet rain. Now I'm extremely curious about how Tifa will play. Before we wrap up, let me show you a few interesting details not directly related to the UI or battle system. Whenever the camera starts shaking due to a strong impact, the damage numbers bounce up and down for a few frames. In one frame, before Cloud's somersault cleaver attack hits, his right leg becomes partially translucent. This might be a system that allows an object covered by another in the front to be better visible. You probably haven't noticed it, but there's a thin line flashing horizontally beneath damage pop-up labels such as critical and blocked. Another subtle but very cool detail I haven't noticed until now are the remnants of Barret's bullet shells on the ground, as seen in the battle against the Cutter machine. Now, let's quickly appreciate those constant 30 FPS in the trailer compared to the janky PSX 2015 trailer battle scenes. Besides the stable frame rate, the current build of the game shows very good polish and seems much closer to the release than the pre-alpha and mostly placeholder footage in 2015. Does that mean a release of Part 1 in 2019 is possible? Let's surely hope so. Alright, this marks the end of the second part of my Final Fantasy VII State of Play trailer analysis. E3 is right around the corner with presumably a huge Final Fantasy VII Remake coverage at Square Enix's presentation on June 10th or June 11th in the early morning if you're living in Europe like me. And you can be sure I'll analyze the golden chocobo out of the new footage, so stay tuned for the next episode of Game Analysis. In the meantime, let us know if there are some details missing from this analysis and feel free to make corrections. Let's have a discussion in the comment section down below. Leave a like, subscribe if you're new, hit the bell button to be immediately notified of future uploads, and don't hesitate to share this video around. This being said, thank you so much for listening in, and I hope to see you again in the next episode of Game Analysis. And always remember, stay safe and take care. Visuezat signing off.